Good evening. This is the call to order for the Policy Committee, Wednesday, July the 3rd at 5:30 p.m. Michelle, we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Tom Hankins.
Here.
Amy Levy.
Here.
And Brian Nichols.
Here.
All members are present.
Okay. Could I get an approval of the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda with the removal of item 2F, policy 546.2, rule 1, support staff dismissal procedure. And the reason I want that item removed is because I don't think it's appropriate to review rule 1 of a policy if you're not also simultaneously reviewing that policy. And by that policy, I mean policy 546.2, support staff and suspension and dismissal. I have particular concern because that main policy has not been reviewed since it was adopted in March of 1999.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Any other discussion?
Well, actually, we need a if anyone is interested in providing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Before we can have discussion on the motion, we need a second if anyone is interested in providing one.
I'll second.
Motion's been seconded and to pull 546.2 off the agenda. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion approved. We'll pull that off the agenda, Michelle. The next item is approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move approval of the minutes with the following adjustment. The minutes correctly note that I left the meeting at 6:36. I had a previous engagement, but the minutes also have me voting in favor of adjournment at 6:52. So if we could correct that, with that correction, I offer a motion to approve the June 5th minutes.
Let me ask Mrs. Levy. Mrs. Levy. Mrs. Levy, is there a way you can turn your Is there a way you can turn your volume up at all?
Is that better?
Got it.
So is that better? Are you able to hear me better?
It's pretty low still. We got the volume as high as it can go here. I didn't know if it was something on your side or not. So if that's the highest we can go, this is what we have to, of course, this is what we have to work with. So we did ask.
My apologies. I will do my best to speak up. My concern with the minutes, they correctly list me as leaving the meeting at 6:36. I had a previous engagement, but the minutes also list that I voted in favor of adjourning the meeting at 6:52, which I wasn't present to do that. So if we could just adjust that portion of the minutes. So with that edit, I'd like to move approval of the June 5th policy minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. We were able to hear that part.
Right.
We'll make it work.
Mrs. Shope, did you get all that? Okay. Okay. So could I have a motion? You made the motion, right, Amy? With that
Correct.
change?
We just need a second.
Okay. Could I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passed. Okay, on to policies for review. First policy is the gender language pronoun use discussion. So I will open the floor for discussion.
I apologize. You were muted for the first part. We're starting with 532.22.
No, we're starting with 2A, gender language pronoun discussion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'll jump in if no one else. And I will be brief because I don't have much new to say. I think the removal of gender is disgusting, and I also think that it is dangerous. I am not clear why we would go out of our way to make a population of our educational community feel less seen. So I don't see the benefit in removing gender. And when I say it's dangerous to remove gender, my concern is if we are able to remove gender, what else could be erased?
What was the end of your sentence? We couldn't hear it.
Oh, my concern is one, I don't see the benefit in going out of our way to potentially make a population of our educational community feel less seen. And two, I think it's dangerous to erase gender, because if we can erase something as critical as gender, what's next on the list? That is very concerning for me.
Thank you for your input, Board Member Levy. Any other discussion?
Yes, I'd just like to weigh in. I don't think anybody's trying to erase or anything. I think it's problematic that if all these pronouns get thrown in, I think we're trying to get to a point where we're inclusive of everyone. And by identifying different pronouns, we may miss a pronoun or two. I think there's verbiage out there that encompasses all students in our district. I think we run into a slippery slope by starting to identify different pronouns. And I think that's what it was kicked back to us to do, is to be inclusive of everyone, all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Okay, I will weigh in. I did some research using the dictionary, the good old dictionary, and they, their, them are pronouns that are all-encompassing and doesn't leave anybody out. And this whole discussion really should be pretty easy because this is not something that's improving academic achievement. It's not producing an approval of absenteeism or discipline absenteeism or academic achievement. Again, they, their, and them, which we were trying to use at the end of he, she, are all encompassing. They cover all genders. And so we do that and we're done. You can look online and you can find lists of 52 and 73 and 45 and all that sort of thing. And this covers them all. So just like, anyway, that's it. That's why we wanted to have this discussion. So So that's it. Any other discussion?
I would just like to know, so when we come to this motion, this will be all encompassing where appropriate? So we're not running into this stumbling block every time we go to change whatever policy?
No?
Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
I have my hand raised.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I had my hand raised. I wasn't sure if you noticed that.
No, I didn't see it. I was looking at my agenda. I apologize, Board Member Levy. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem at all. My only other concern is, if I'm understanding you correctly, you want to use they, them, their. That's fine for plural, but what if you're referring to one student? Is the notion to use the student?
That would work.
Well, what about our Spanish translation? Because you have to pick a gender. So which gender are we picking for our Spanish translation when it's the singular form of the student?
Okay, then the student.
It's either L or ella. You have to pick a gender for Spanish translation. If it's the singular form, the student, it has to be masculine or feminine.
Okay? So then we would use the masculine and feminine.
You said masculine and feminine, then that would be the equivalent of he, she, if
Okay?
you're not selecting one.
Okay? Do you have something?
Yeah, I didn't know if you were,
No, I thought you looked like you wanted to say something, so.
oh, me or Tom?
You.
Oh, yeah, I did have, I put my hand up. I didn't know
Okay,
if I was,
again, I don't.
if you were recognizing me or Tom. And I don't know. So, in the Spanish language, if the gender is unknown, it defaults to the male. And in terms of pronouns, this is my concern. The website, the LGBTQIAUCDavis.edu and the UW Milwaukee Education LGBTRC websites. Between these two websites, there are over 90 pronouns. And I'm concerned that, you can look, they, them, on their website are identified as singular. They're also used as plural, depending on what people want their pronouns to be. There are now even cases where people are using we and us as the singular form for themselves. And that's fine. What I want to see is that all of these pronouns are considered, and by saying, okay, let's have one neutral pronoun, and that's going to represent these pronouns. And, 5, 10 years, there might be more, there might be fewer pronouns, I don't know. But I am concerned because when we look at how things are written, so take the city of Beloit, in their ordinances, if I may.
Absolutely.
So their ordinance 7.254, securing of structures. One sentence they have, the building official shall issue a board up permit if, after the investigation, he determines that the boarding up later, if the owner, occupant, or operator of a structure, blah, 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 he or she shall. Again, later it goes, the person responsible, later he or she. In another ordinance, 5.04, talking about powers and duties of officers, the firemen and policemen, and he may cause, And later, talking about the fireman's duties, his duties. So those are inconsistent. They have he and she, kind of all over the place. Rock County ordinances, 6.111, enforcement. If a person does not comply with a written order from the health officer or his or her designee of the person, and at one place, they actually define person in their ordinances and give a definition of what the person is. This is what I see kind of us, what we're doing is, defining they, them. Later in Rock County ordinances, they have any person engaging he, she, his, her. Another one, the property owner to their, even the Wisconsin State Legislature has issues with having consistency with their pronouns. The individual is, and this is state statute 103.1, family or medical leave. The individual, blah, 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 for himself or herself. Another one, older individuals, the associated to assist in enabling them to meet their basic needs. The buyer may, that he or she, a child with his or her, placement of a child out of their homes. So there's inconsistency, and I think if we can come up with one inclusive policy that says these are the pronouns that we're going to use in our written policy, we're not saying that anybody outside of the board has to use these. We will save ourselves a lot of time because there are some people that want to continue, having discussion over this. I think we just need to come up with a policy and say this is how we're going to move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Johnson. Any other discussion?
I would like to share in this thought as well.
Absolutely, Dr. Garrison.
Thank you. One of the things that we have to be reminded of is, again, we do have a strategic plan. We do have a mission that, speaks to the need for this diversity conversation. One of the things that I believe the School District of Beloit prides itself on is the welcoming environment for all. And that welcoming environment for all has encompassed the pronoun conversation. The way we have been writing our pronoun conversation up until now, one could argue I didn't know there was a concern. And so now that we have this space now, I'm hearing that there's a concern. And so I would just like us to be reminded that up until now, I didn't know we had this concern. And so if we look back at our strategic plan, if we look back at our, mission vision, right on our webpage even, it talks about, again, that all inclusivity. And it does talk about us all, working in that space together. The pronouns, one could argue, and as Mrs. Johnson has laid out, it could be 50, it could be 100, it can be 2. And I think we all are saying that space because it can go in many different ways. We have been using he, she, they for all of our policies. That's a consistent thought. I know you just mentioned, Mr. Nichols, the they, them, their space. Mr. Hankins, I'm hearing you say something similar to that. Okay. The he, she is masculine. It is also, feminine to all languages, I guess. One could argue that. And so is there a compromise here with he, she, they, them? Because then, now because at some point we're going to run into something's going to get left out. And so I'm allow my team also to chime in on that too. Would you like Mrs. Beavers to?
Would you like to speak, Mrs. Beavers?
I just was thinking, has anybody considered all students?
Actually, I think I brought students up several months ago, and it was not really received. So I agree with you. Students, everybody in this school district, all 5,200, correct, are students. And they're all covered by that word, but that's a noun, that's not a pronoun. So I appreciate that, Mrs. Beavers. I agree with you. But in the interest of being all-inclusive, again, they, their, them covers that. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know that currently. It used to, yes. I think it's antiquated language. I don't know what the right answer is.
Board Member Hankins?
Just want to weigh in on strategic plans. To me, and I'm not sure about this board, but strategic plans are living documents, living and breathing, changeable. They need to change with the times. And when this strategic plan was written, just like policies are written, they can be modified and or updated. I just want to throw that into the conversation, that just so it says so doesn't mean that we're not doing what it says, but if it conflicts with what is a strategic plan, and we all know it's for the betterment of our district, then I think there's ways around, not around, don't mean that, making it all work cohesively. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. So I'll offer a suggestion, and then I have a question just to clarify the process. I believe that we should stick with he, she, they, and I think it would be a good idea that there be a policy on gender language. It doesn't have to be extensive, but if we said that he, she, they, and in that policy we delineated that, as Board President Johnson pointed out, there could be hundreds of pronouns potentially, and that they is a representation of the remainder of the spectrum. And so we're not going to have a list of 17, 23, however many, but including he, she, they is an acknowledgement that there is a spectrum of gender that many acknowledge. And so I think that that would be an appropriate resolution from my perspective. Now, that being offered, my question about logistics, is the point of this discussion to offer a recommendation to the full board? Because if we are going to do a policy on gender language to kind of put this to bed, what has been done in the past is that the full board directs the policy committee in the will of the board. So again, is our role this evening to create a recommendation to go to the full board, for the full board to have hopefully a brief discussion and then direct the policy committee how to move forward, because this isn't a decision that the three of us on the committee can make and then it's done.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Well, I came prepared, and I thought you were going to be here, so you won't be able to see this, I don't think, but I happened to write a proposed gender policy. It's very simple.
Just a point of order, please. It's not listed in the agenda. In fact, it says no policy, so we're not able to work on that type of policy this evening.
It's proposed, it's not a policy.
Oh, you said policy, so
I said
forgive me.
proposed. Proposed, yeah. It's not a policy.
A proposed what?
It's a proposed gender policy.
It's a proposed policy.
Yes. Right.
So we can't work on that because we didn't notice it.
It's a suggestion. That's why we use the word proposed.
But we can't work on it because it's not noticed in the agenda. In fact, it says no policy. So I don't think that's fair to work on a proposed policy when we didn't let the public know that that's what would be happening this evening.
Okay, well, I'm going to move forward with it. Thank you, Board Member Levy. I appreciate your comments. So
Okay, I just wanted us to be mindful of how we notice meetings, and in our agreement of no surprises, I just want to be on record as saying I think this is inappropriate, and I'll mute myself.
Thank you. So here's what I've written. For the purpose of efficient policy language, the School District of Beloit Board of Education policy shall be written using they, them, and their. For the purpose of all School District of Beloit policies, they, them, and their will represent all pronouns. Take one, pass it down. Mrs. Shope, is there any way that we can share this with Board Member Levy? I don't know a way to do it from here, so.
No, I appreciate that, but I don't need to see it because I think it's inappropriate to work on this when it wasn't noticed. So again,
Board Member Levy, we can't hear you. Your volume went way down.
oh, are you able to hear me now?
Now I can hear you, but it went.
Perfect.
It took a dive.
Yeah, I don't need to see it
Okay.
because I won't be participating because it's inappropriate to work on a policy when you didn't notice that. So I don't need to see it because I won't be participating. So
Okay.
I'll mute myself and feel free.
Thank you. Board Member Hankins?
Well, as I read the agenda, this is part of a discussion. We are not moving anything forward. We're going to assume it's going to go to the full board anyways. We're just discussing, and that is in our agenda.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. So could I get a motion to move this to the full board for the next meeting?
I motion to move this forward
To the full board?
to the full board,
For the next
yes,
meeting?
from the policy committee.
Yes. Second? All those in favor, say aye.
You need to offer discussion on the motion.
Discussion.
Has the administration seen or provided input on your proposed policy that's not noticed on the agenda?
Just a point of clarity as well. Mr. Nichols did bring this today, so I wasn't able to see this until now. Can we make any changes? I mean, are we trying to make changes to this, or is this what we want to move? And I know it's been motioned.
This
First
is
and
a
second, so-
this is a proposal, Dr. Garrison. It's not, we were just going to move this to the full board for further discussion and potential policy implementation. To
Well,
come
typically-
back to the policy committee to write the actual policy.
Sure. But typically, as Board Member Levy is mentioning, the administration would have a chance to see what's being proposed. We have our opportunity to, share our thoughts with it. And then from here, it's an agreed upon space, and then it goes to the full board. That's how it's been done. Now,
Okay.
again, that's just how it's been done.
Okay.
I would like to add,
I need to delete. I got gender in there twice, so.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I would like to add that what Mrs. Levy is stating from a discussion perspective, we were fine, but I think there is a thought that falls into the no policy space. Because I've also thought about writing a policy that I, was prepared to write and show as well. I mean, just one of those spaces that I didn't bring that. I didn't, think to bring it. And so I don't want anyone thinking that we haven't been thinking about this on the administrative side as well, administration side. And so that's why I mentioned, was there any, and this is part of the discussion, was there any middle ground with he, she, they, them as an opportunity to capture some of what we were doing mirrored with what you are proposing now, minus the there. That's he, she, they, them, minus the there as a middle ground. That's what I was, that's what I had mentioned as a discussion, and I'll pause for thoughts.
Board President Johnson, do you want to have something?
So my understanding is right now, it sounds like you guys want to bring this discussion back to the full board, not for the board to implement a policy, but just to get the entire board's input on it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is just a suggestion. It's not a policy that you are asking the board to approve.
That's correct.
Okay,
Again, that's why it's written as proposed.
okay, thank you.
Yes, well, in due respect to everyone here, we've been talking about this for a month, and it's on the agenda. Why administration seems to be a little bit, wants more input. I don't want to see it kicked down the road. It's a very important issue, but I think where we're at, we're safe. It's going to the board for discussion, and it'll be hashed out there. And if it gets kicked back to policy, it gets kicked back. But I don't want to delay it another month. Put it that way. Even though it will be delayed another month if it gets kicked back.
Okay. So, all those in favor of moving this to the full?
My hand is raised.
I'm sorry? Oh.
My hand is raised. I'm just waiting to be acknowledged.
Okay. Board Member Levy, you,
Thank you so much. So just for clarification, is this a proposed policy?
it's a proposed policy for discussion. It's not a policy.
That's not a thing. If it's is it a proposed policy?
Okay.
No, I'm asking.
It's a proposed policy for discussion at the next board meeting to see how the whole full board feels, and then we will bring it back to the policy committee for further work into an actual policy.
So if it's a proposed policy, then it goes to the full board for potential approval. There's no such thing as a proposed policy for discussion that goes to the full board and then comes back to the policy committee. So, and that, you're doing your own thing, so that's fine. But are you going to name your policy? Are you going to give your policy a policy number? Just curious about the structure of this. And again, just noting that this says discussion, no policy. So I would gently push back on Board Member Hankins, who said, and I believe if I'm incorrect, please correct me, that you're not sure why the administration didn't come prepared with a policy when it literally says no policy. This feels like a policy ambush. So again, just wondering if you're going to give your policy a name and a number.
There is no number. There is a proposed name. Again, the key word is proposed for discussion at the full board meeting, and then we will take it from there, probably back to this committee with the school district working up a policy number and a policy name. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried.
No, you need to say if anyone opposes, you need to offer the ability to abstain. That's not how the vote goes.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstention?
I am abstaining because this is a policy ambush, and we have just changed the cadence of how policy flows from committee to the full board.
Thank you for your input, Board Member Levy.
You're very welcome.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 2B, 532.22, workers' compensation. Floor is open for discussion.
I'll go ahead. A couple of questions. In that opening sentence, it says workers' compensation, WC, and then later on in the policy, it's also referred to as workers' compensation insurance, WCI. So I'm wondering, is there a difference? And if there's not a difference, I don't have a preference, but if we could just make that consistent, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Where is the WCI? I missed that. Where's it referred to as WCI? Is it on the second page?
The second page, injuries not covered. Some injuries may not be covered by workers' compensation insurance. So again, my question is workers' compensation and workers' compensation insurance the same thing? If they're different, we're fine. If they're the same thing, if we could pick how we're noting it and just be consistent. Ms. Almendarez has her hand raised, so she may be able to offer clarification.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. Mrs. Almendarez, you have the floor. Mrs. Almendarez, can you hear us? I can only relate my experience, but this is a different state, but the two were synonymous with each other. So, but I can't speak for the state of Wisconsin.
She said she's muted on our end. I don't know.
No, you. I'm not. No. Jeez.
She's gonna log off and come back in. My apologies for that.
Oh, that's okay.
Ms. Lee, she's gonna log off and come back in.
No problem. Board Chair, would you like for me to move forward, or are we pausing?
I'm actually trying to use my phone to look up workers' compensation in Wisconsin to see if we can find an answer that way.
That doesn't answer my question.
Well, just hang on a second.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, you're loud and clear. Wow.
Oh, sorry. Okay, they're one and the same. For the sake of consistency, we can certainly change it so that it reads the same.
Do you have a preference which one we use, workers' compensation or workers' compensation insurance?
Workers' compensation.
Okay.
So if I could continue, the first portion in pink that's stricken through, workers' compensation insurance shall cover all district employees. Since that's proposed for removal, my question is, are there any employees that are not covered?
No.
Then why would we, I'm not seeing the benefit of removing that.
Because it's an employee policy, so I think it's implied that it doesn't exclude anyone.
So hourly employees, everyone is covered.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. If we jump down to benefits provided by workers' compensation include, under medical and treatment, the first bullet point, who pays for that medical and treatment? Is that completely covered by workers' comp? Is that some shared portion?
It's
Or is that the employee?
sorry. That is completely covered by workers' comp.
Okay. And then the last one in that section, vocational rehabilitation. Are there parameters around that? Is that, like 12 months of retraining, or are there some outlines that we can reference employees to?
It is really based on a case by case, but it's statutory that wherever possible, if the employee is not able to return to the regular job, that there will be some vocational rehabilitation provided. What that looks like may not be the same for me as it may be for someone who has a different skill set.
Okay. And then my last question on this policy is actually found on the second page at the last portion of green. That says temporary disability will be denied when the employee is released to light duty work and is suspended or terminated due to misconduct, or, and that I think legal is supposed to be included, legal substantial fault connected with the employee's work. That seems like a lot of things happening, and so my question is, are temporary or long-term disability determined at the point of the injury or after the 14 to 60 days covered by either WFMLA or FMLA?
So light duty can be identified by the medical provider at any point in time in the recovery of the injury. So, for example, if I fell, I hurt my arm, but it's my left arm, I can come back to work and work using my right hand and arm, then I may be able to come back to light duty with minimal keyboard, computer use.
Okay, it just seems like in that sentence, a lot of things are being tackled. So temporary disability will be denied, and then we jump to employees being suspended or terminated. And it is unclear how those two things are related when I'm reading the policy.
So temporary disability, as it pertains to what workers' compensation provides, they will not continue paying benefits. So it's not the district. They will not continue paying benefits if the person is either negligent in returning to work with the light duty work that their doctor says they could do. So if I just simply refuse to come back because I want to continue collecting money, but the doctor has said you are fit to return to work on light duty, then they can suspend the benefits because I'm not following medical guidance and incurring a cost that I'm not entitled to. Likewise, if I return to work on light duty and say, for example, under reasonable suspicion, I am asked to be tested and I happen to have drugs in my system, which would be a violation of policy, and I end up being terminated for that violation of policy, well, that will not entitle me to then collect temporary disability benefits either, because I caused myself to be terminated. So my loss of wages is not associated with that.
But isn't that already covered? Because if it's horseplay, or if you're injured doing something that's outside of your job description, or if you were using a substance, then you're not eligible for workman's comp. Isn't that accurate? So that's why this felt like it was something different, because those things are already covered.
No, not really. The first part that talks about the exclusions is right off the bat, if I fall off a ladder at work and I test positive for some narcotic that I don't have a prescription for, workers' comp can deny my claim. Now, I'm on workers' comp. I was eligible to have medical benefits and lost wages, compensation, etc., and I'm released to go back to light duty. I come back to work, and then now is when I test positive for drugs. And I'm just using that as an example. Now they can cut me off from the temporary disability payments that would cover.
Okay, so and thank you for working with me through this. So I fell off a ladder. I was not on drugs at the time. I'm collecting workman's comp. They say you can come back to light duty. I am found to have been using a drug unassociated with my injury, but my workman's comp can be cut off. Is that what you're describing?
Yes. So basically, it's their way of ensuring that they're not going to be compensating an employee to either refuse to come back to work or to come back to work and not follow the expectations of the employer and cause themselves to be terminated and then continue to receive lost wages for something they caused upon themselves that is not related to their injury.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much.
Now, I did find an error, and sometimes I think this happens when we go back and forth, that I noticed and I wanted to point out, and that is on the second page, the second sentence, it's omitting the L in leave time. So with available paid leave time. And then on the third paragraph down, before it goes into the pink highlight, once FMLA or WFMLA eligibility is exhausted, no later than the 61st date of lost time from work, the employee will receive their compensation, and then it says to the income, and then the employee will receive their compensation directly to the income. That does not belong there.
So which
I don't
part,
have that on my version.
which part's supposed to be not be there?
On page 2,
No, I'm sorry. You said
The
the employee will receive their compensation directly,
Comma, or period.
or just period.
what I'm reading says on the second sentence, it starts with the employee will receive their compensation to the income, comma, the employee will receive their compensation directly from the workers' compensation carrier. So that will receive, the employee will receive, the first one needs to be stricken.
On the version that I'm looking at, it is crossed out.
Oh, well, I just took it off of the board docs. Let me try opening
So
it.
what I have says, once FMLA or WFMLA eligibility is exhausted, no later than the 61st day of lost work, the employee will receive their compensation directly from the workers' compensation carrier.
Okay, I just reopened it and still open it to that, so I'm glad that it is accurate on your end. Thank you.
The ones that we have printed here,
Which is what's on board.
which is not what, which is on the agenda, not on board docs. Miss Shope, did we get the right copy here? And that's what we didn't get the right copy? Because what Mrs. Levy is reading is correct. What the copies that we have is the previous version.
That could possibly, with having the troubles with my computer, it could be that I grabbed the wrong copy today for you and I and Ms. Almendaris, and then some of the policies had fallen off, and so I was re-uploading, and I may have re-uploaded the wrong one, so I'll double check that and make sure that the correct one is uploaded.
So the one that Mrs. Levy you're reading is the one that you see online? I'm sorry.
So I pulled, no, you're fine. I downloaded when I was prepping, and then I got the email that there was a reposting.
Correct.
So I updated my download. So this is what's currently on board docs.
It probably was until I was working this afternoon after they fixed my computer.
Oh, okay. I printed
So I apologize. And the other little thing I was going to note is where Ms. Levy was notating that word legal before substantial fault, that legal should not be there. I was bringing up the legal Wisconsin Workers' Compensation Act and the state statute chapter 102, and I had to do copy and paste, and I think it pasted twice. So that word legal won't be there if this moves forward. I'll make sure that I get that out of there.
Thank you, Mrs. Shope. So are we clear now? Mrs. Almendaris, are we clear now? And Mrs. Shope, are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chairman
so could I-
Nichols, could you just read the correct statement on that? So I understand we're omitting, I think, a part of a sentence or a full sentence.
Okay,
And I do
well,
understand it, but
I don't have anything to look, I don't have anything to look at that.
I would be happy to read it if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine now, Mrs. Levy. Thank you.
All right, perfect. On the third paragraph, Board Member Hankins, on the second page, once FMLA or WFMLA eligibility is exhausted, no later than the 61st day of lost time from work, the employee will receive their compensation directly from the workers' compensation carrier.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the word legal at the very bottom, that'll be removed. And that were the other changes, correct? Board Member Levy, that was the only two changes, correct? The legal one, okay.
Yep, correct. If there's no further discussion, I move approval of policy 532.22, workers' compensation, onto the full board for a first reading.
Do I have a
I
second?
second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Move to the full board. Okay, next item, 2C, 533, employee recruiting and hiring. Any discussion?
I have a couple items. One, just to provide some historical context. When the rules have not been overly cumbersome, we have begun the practice of collapsing the rules into the policy. So what I mean by that is we would have policy 533. We would potentially retire policy 533 rule 1 and use the current title as the header. So that would be moved to the main policy. And then we would do the same thing for policy 533 rule 2. So I guess that would be a good place to start. Is anyone opposed to doing that?
I am not.
I'm not.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so what that would look like, and then I'll discuss my edits, unless you wanted to jump in, Committee Vice Chair Hankins. I am happy to yield the floor if you wanted to get us started.
Board Member Levy, you're asking me to make the motion to,
No.
I'm sorry.
No, there is no motion yet. What I'm
Okay.
saying is, since you're the committee vice chair,
Yes.
I am happy to yield the floor if you wanted to get our discussion started.
I yield the floor.
Okay, perfect. So what we're looking at policy 533, which a quick question just on logistics of naming, employee recruiting / hiring, and then it has dash after first committee. And this question might be for Mrs. Shope. Is there a reason that clause is there, or is the title just intended to be employee recruiting / hiring?
So the title of the policy is just employee recruiting / hiring. The dash after first committee is so that you guys know there were revisions between the last time it was here in June and coming back, because the committee had made revisions to the first paragraph. And it also helps me keep it straight in board docs that this is the most current policy version, but that will come
Got it.
off when it goes to the board and obviously when it becomes an active policy. So that's why there's a dash there. If it was part of the title, I wouldn't have a dash there.
Perfect. That makes sense now. All right. So here are my proposed edits. At the end of that first paragraph, I think we should just leave it with that last sentence with, while this responsibility cannot be waived, the board assigns responsibility for employee recruitment and recommendation to the superintendent. I think when we throw in selection, that may confuse people on the process. Now, technically, our superintendent, as he should be doing, will help select candidates or to recommend, but to leave it at selection, I think omitting that streamlines it and gives a better description of how the process flows. So again, I think that last sentence should say for employee recruitment and recommendation to the superintendent. And then if we move down to that last paragraph, couple questions. So the district shall not deny employment opportunities. And Ms. Almendarez helped me with this. What is HR is not my wheelhouse, so I am leaning on your expertise. What does employment opportunity encompass? Does that mean the ability to apply, to be interviewed, to be recommended for hire? Is it all of those things? Is it something that I haven't listed?
It is all of the above. So any aspect of being able to work for the district, from the application to the interviewing to the selection to the recommendation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the district shall not deny employment opportunities nor discriminate in any employment against properly qualified individuals. So if it encompasses the whole spectrum of employment, from you submitting an application to you being approved by the board, how can we deny people who are not properly qualified to apply? Does that make sense?
Yes, and that verbiage aligns with not selecting someone that is properly qualified for any of those listed reasons. If the person is not qualified and that's why we're not moving forward with them, that's one thing. But when they are equally qualified to other applicants, but we're not choosing them because they're female or they're married or they have a disability, that's what this protects against.
Okay. No, that I am completely fine with that. The verbiage just seemed a little odd. All right, my next set of questions. Shall not discriminate in employment against, and I'm just going to jump down to the things that are concerning. Conviction record. In an educational setting, I think your conviction record should be a reason to deny employment opportunities to some individuals.
That is covered
Let
on
me,
the.
oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead, Didi. Sorry. Go ahead, Didi. Ms. Almendarez.
That would be PI, because not every conviction would bar you from working for a school district.
Okay, so it's not parsed out, but some convictions would.
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
Is everyone comfortable with putting certain or conviction record? Certain convictions? Because then that is clear that not all convictions would bar you from employment opportunities, but certain convictions will.
I think you could easily add that word and it wouldn't be an issue, but please understand that as administration, we have to look at all this before we even bring it to you. So if there was something that was a red flag in any of our practices here, we wouldn't even get to this point because that person wouldn't come to your table. So
no, I totally get that, but sometimes our policy doesn't mirror our practice. And it sounds like the practice you're outlining is wholly reasonable. But what the words say on the paper is that a conviction record won't preclude you from an employment opportunity in the district. And I don't think that's wholly accurate.
Well, if you're properly,
No, you're fine.
If you are properly qualified. So in the school district of Beloit, for example, a teacher would not be properly qualified if they cannot be eligible for a teaching license or ERA. So I think that falls in line with what the properly qualified criteria is. And part of it is being eligible to procure licensure. Where that would come into play, I think, would be with positions that would not have a requirement for licensure that would preclude them. So I do not have an issue with saying arrest record, comma, certain conviction record, etc.
Okay, and I think so certain conviction.
Correct. I wouldn't have a problem with either. I just want to make sure I noted that, again, you wouldn't even see that because we would already have vetted if this person was possibly qualified before I'm bringing a recommendation to the board for hire. So we can add.
I believe that is true.
Correct.
I just want our policy to reflect the good judgment that our administrators are showing. That's all. And then this is smaller, but since we're discussing it, that last sentence, let me see when it's a good place to start reading. Military service, use or non-use of lawful products. That didn't make sense to me, because if it's a lawful product, why would we care if someone, or why would that impact if someone is using or not using a lawful product?
Because if we test them, so one, there are three things that we do with the pre-employment requirements: the background check, and then there's a drug screening. They can test positive for a drug screening, but if they have a prescription for what they tested positive for, then that is a lawful product that they can use, and they will not be discriminated because they tested positive on a drug test for something that was lawful.
Yeah, I didn't realize product meant drug. And my concern is other people reading the policy might not, that's why that didn't make sense to me. Are there objections to say use or non-use of lawful drugs? Or is there another word that would fit better but still give the same understanding?
Well, it can also pertain to alcohol. So because it talks about off the employer's premises during non-working hours. So we can't discriminate against somebody because we see them at the local tavern, every night till 3 a.m. That would not be a reason that we would discriminate their employment if they're using lawful products that would otherwise not be allowed if they were on duty on our premises.
Can we just say
So does
lawful? Can we
everyone
say
but-
lawful / drugs? Dee Dee?
Or
Lawful.
alcohol?
That's fine.
Okay, so I would recommend use or non-use of lawful drugs or alcohol.
And can we also strike one of the two lawfuls? On my version, I see two
Yes.
lawfuls. I don't know if that.
Yep.
Yep.
Got it. Mrs. Almendares already got that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the last thing, so during working hours or declining to attend a meeting, I have no idea what that is. What does that mean?
Oops, sorry. I didn't realize I muted myself again. So, for example, let's just say that an individual is not, let's just say I can't attend a policy committee meeting, and there's an opportunity for me to get promoted and be selected for a different position. And all of a sudden, whether or not I attended a policy committee meeting is the basis by which I'm being denied the employment. And this runs into like after hours activities, et cetera. So it's all encompassing to ensure we're not discriminating like against single parents or others who may have more of a conflict in schedule.
Thank you for the clarification. No one should miss policy, but are we comfortable with saying a work-related meeting so people understand the context of that?
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Perfect. All right, that's all I got.
Any further discussion on policy 533? Mrs. Shope?
I'm sorry.
Oh, that was from before about the word legal.
Okay. Okay, so based on your previous comments, Ms. Board Member Levy, we're going to try to roll these into one.
Right. Those are just my questions and comments for 533. I don't want to hog the floor, so I'm pausing
Okay.
until you move us forward to what is currently 533 Rule 1, knowing that that will be rolled into the main policy.
Okay, we're at 533 Rule 1 for discussion. The floor is open. Board Member Hankins, do you have anything to?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Board Member Levy?
Yeah, a couple things. What is currently number one, well, let me back up. So when 533 Rule 1 is rolled into 533, the header for this portion of the information will be professional educator recruitment / selection procedures. And then under application, I think we should take that number one and put that in front of that first sentence as a part of the introduction. So what I'm proposing is above application, it says, in order that district staff may consider every eligible candidate for a given position and to ensure that each candidate is considered for positions for which the person is qualified, an orderly procedure for application for employment in the school district of Beloit is necessary. And then we continue with what is already above. The following procedures shall be used in the recruitment and selection of professional educators in the district. So, and then 2 and 3 are stricken out. So number 1 would start with 4. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it does.
And what I'm further proposing is that 4, 5, 6 become number 1. So that could read, notice of job vacancies will be posted on the district website and postings will be available on the Wisconsin Education Career Access, better known as WeCan website. New sentence, vacancies will be posted for a minimum of 7 calendar days. I think that can be number 1. The current 7 and 8 are up for removal, which I have no issue with. The current 9, I think, should be number 2, and then 10 and 11 should be 3 and 4, unless anyone objects.
No objections from administration. My question that I do have, Board, Mr. Nichols, can I proceed, please?
Absolutely, Dr. Kears.
My question I do have, when you moved 1 to the opening sentence, is that going before, are we striking through the following procedures shall be used?
Nope. It's going to go right before that, and
Okay.
then you roll right into the sentence that's there, the following procedures.
Okay, I missed that part. Thank you. All right, thank you. That's all I
No
have.
problem. Okay, and then under the header of interviews, couple questions. So what is proposed to remain is interviews shall be selected after online applications have been screened. Do we think it's appropriate to put who the screener is? If we follow past protocol, it would probably be the superintendent or designee, or does someone else do the screening?
The screening is done by the hiring manager or, it varies. It could be the assistant principal is requested to review the applicants and move forward the ones that are going to be interviewed. Usually it should be the hiring manager, but I would hate to make it so specific that it bars anyone else from doing the preliminary screening.
No, that makes sense. Is anyone opposed to saying interviews shall be selected after online applications have been screened by the hiring manager or designee?
Well, I can tell you that as a superintendent, I screen applicants as well. So I know it's always understood that I could do that. I just don't want it to be. So I agree with Dee, Mrs. Almendarez, that I don't want to generalize it too much, but I think we got to figure out a better way to say this part right here. I mean, I'm okay with interviews shall be selected. I don't know how to say this part still.
So I think there's a couple ways to do it. One, we could leave it as is and say that's enough information.
That's
Or if you want to provide like information for how the process works, after the applications have been screened by the superintendent, hiring manager, or designee. Or again, option 1 is to just leave it as is.
I'm open to leaving it as is because, again, that in the absence of me or let's say a hiring manager, it could go to assistant principal. Heck, we can actually I'm sorry for saying heck. My apologies. We can actually ask. My apologies for that. Seriously, we can actually ask teaching and learning. There's different administrators that could participate in the screening process. So
No problem.
I think we
Not
should leave it
committed
as
to
is.
it. I just wanted to see if we wanted to clarify.
yeah, I think we should leave it as is because I don't want to get too specific. If it's open,
Got it.
we will screen. That's the bottom line. We have to screen.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the first portion under interviews that's highlighted in green, hiring manager while including various stakeholders, either on the interview team or in the interview process. So my question is, what does it mean to participate in the interview process but not be on the interview team?
So sometimes there are opportunities where, well, let me pause. Mrs. Almendarez, would you like to respond to that first?
Certainly. So an interview team is usually comprised of final decision makers, whereas in the case of being included in the interview process, we can have, say, community members that will look at the last two candidates for a certain position, say, for example, their parents at a school where a principal is being selected, and although their input will be considered, they would not have access to all of the employee information online. They're just part of the process, but not part of the interview team because of the composition of who's making ultimately the decisions.
Do you think it's prudent or necessary to include, and it doesn't have to be like super thorough, but just to give an outline sketch of who could be involved in the hiring process? And again, I'm fine with no thank you, but just wondering if that's something we wanted to include in policy. What could compose your participation in the interview process?
I think it can be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think we could easily add something to it, but sometimes those compositions change based off of the needs that we have in the school district, and then also based off of the timing of an interview team. So I'm 50-50 with leaving it the same, but if we did add, again, it goes back to adhering to what's written, and then you go into that gray area again when we, let's just say, fall like right now in the summer where people are gone and trying to figure out, can we even put it together?
Yeah,
in
and
team? So
let me apologize because your comment leads me to believe I could have been more clear. Not necessarily that we need to identify roles of like this person, or this position will be included, but just to delineate, if you're on the interview team, you'll have access to all the candidate materials. Mm-hmm. If you are not on the interview team, but involved somehow in the interview process, you may have limited access to candidate information. Just so we should set that expectation of what information you will have access to as a participant. Or again, I'm fine with us leaving it as is, just offering that as a suggestion.
Ms. Almendarez,
I
what's your
suggest
thoughts?
Oh,
What's your thoughts?
I suggest leaving it as is because I think that would fall more into processes and procedures. There's countless examples that I can give. For example, if we have two candidates that were selected by the hiring team, and as part of the hiring process or the interview process, they're doing one-on-one, say with members of the board or members of the public. They're not necessarily part of the interview team, but they are certainly part of the process.
No, now that you said that, I really appreciate it. And I think the content that we just got done discussing would be great for an admin regs. Don't get me started on admin regs because I think we have one of them and we should have a robust collection. So that's a conversation for another day. But like that procedural things of like how you execute the policy, I think admin regs is a great place for that. And that way it's outside of policy to give you the needed flexibility to keep the process moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then my last comment on this current policy is I think selection/appointment should be renamed that header to recommendation. One, I just think it's misleading because the selection isn't made until the end of the process when the board votes. And then in that number 2, the superintendent shall accept or reject the recommendation and shall forward an accepted recommendation to the Board of Education for final action instead of the appointment. And it could just be me, so feel free to push back colleagues. That appointment puts me in the mind frame of I pick you to do this. It doesn't lead me to think that there has been a robust screening, interview, application, rigorous process. Those two things feel different to me. So I would recommend that it says, instead of the appointment is not official, that employment is not official until after the board approval. Unless anyone objects.
I stepped away for one quick second. That last part where you said the employment versus the approval.
She wants to change this to recommendation.
Yeah, so that last sentence where it says the appointment is not official until after the board's approval, I would prefer employment is not official. And again, the gist of what I was saying is that appointment, for me, and this could just be me, an appointment seems like I pick you to do this, and I don't think it fully describes the weight of what is being done in the recruitment process. There's screenings, there is employee interview teams, there's other interaction potentially. So it's not just an appointment, like I picked someone to do this. There was a rigorous process.
I mean, of course, that change is accurate to what the board has to approve, and so I wouldn't have to. There's no objections with changing appointment to employment.
Okay.
Or the heading to recommendation.
Oh, here.
Yes, yeah, because that's what it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay, it's a recommendation, correct?
Point of order, I didn't catch the title of the section.
It's
Recommendation?
Yeah, recommendation. Just recommendation. Correct.
So it would be application, interview, and recommendation.
And just for clarity, item number 1, where it says that the Executive Director of Human Resources shall recommend the appointment, we will also be changing that to recommending the employment of the selected candidate to the superintendent?
I think that's appropriate,
That's
just to be
good.
consistent.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then Committee Chair Nichols, I will yield the floor until you open for discussion on what is currently Rule 2.
Thank you, Board Member Levy. So are we all set on Rule 1? Ms. Shope and Mrs. Almendarez, are we all good? Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Okay, 5:33. Board Member Hankins, you had a question?
Yeah, I believe this is the area. I heard Mrs. Levy say, under interviews, first statement. Mine reads, interviews shall be scheduled. I heard selected. I don't know if they're synonymous. After online applications have been screened. That's what my copy
I have
says.
scheduled on my version.
Right, but I heard you say selected. I don't know if they're synonymous.
No, I think she left it at scheduled. Did you not, Board Member Levy? Interviews are scheduled?
I didn't offer any changes, and my version says scheduled.
Okay.
Okay, I thought I heard
yeah.
you say differently. My other question is, it's just a question. When it says interview team to me, is there a specific number or just more than one?
More than one.
Thank you.
I apologize. I'll defer to Mrs. Almendarez, but that is correct. It's more
Yes,
than
absolutely.
one.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay. 533 Rule 2 is open for discussion.
I just have a small item, just making sure that guidelines for additional professional staff, and Ms. Shope already cleared up the clause after that won't be included. Just making sure we use that as the header when we roll it into the main policy.
The title will be the header.
Header.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Board Member Hankins, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay. I do have a suggested change. Last paragraph, in the request for additional positions, if the request for additional positions is approved, the superintendent shall submit a recommendation for board approval rather than an employment recommendation. I think it should be a recommendation for board approval.
That is accurate.
I actually don't have an issue with employment recommendations because that's how it comes to us. We usually see employment recommendations, Exhibit A and B. So I think for consistency, I'm fine with employment recommendation.
I think this is the request to add an FTE, though.
Which will show up on an employee recommendation, correct?
Since I can't speak for before, but since I've been here, it's always been as a memo presented to the board, whether it's reconfiguration of a department that warrants a change in FTEs. I have not yet, and that doesn't mean that's not how it was done before, I've requested an additional position on the board rec.
So just for clarification, so what I'm thinking is your department puts together a request for a new music teacher, and then that goes to the superintendent, and when it comes to the board, it usually comes with a candidate. Could you envision an instance where a position would come for approval without a candidate in mind?
Absolutely. If we need to hire, say, an additional counselor, we cannot recruit for it if we don't have an FTE to recruit for. So if we need to add an FTE for a counselor, then the board would have to be made aware of the need for an additional FTE so that we can add it, and then we can recruit for it.
So what would that be called if it's not what is that process? What is the name for that?
That would be a request for additional FTE. We wouldn't be hiring anyone on it because first we would have to make sure that the board is okay with that position existing in the first place before we can advertise it and select anybody to hire for it.
Perfect. Thank you.
A good example is it's for addendums and not for employment. But when we had the discussion at the board meeting last night about a choir club, that's something that will come to the board in memo form with all of the information that is included here after it is cleared through Dr. Garrison, but we would not necessarily have anyone assigned to that addendum at the time.
Thank you, Mrs. Almendarez. Board President, no.
No, I think they.
Board Member
got it figured.
Hankins, any discussion? No, sir. Okay, so we will move that with the change at changing "and" to "a" and employment deleted. So it will read, if the request for additional positions is approved, comma, the superintendent shall submit recommendation for board approval. A recommendation for board approval. Correct? Okay. So now I need a motion to combine all of these three policies into policy 533.
I move approval of policy 533 as amended to the full board for first reading, and to move the recommendation to retire policies 533 Rule 1 and 533 Rule 2.
I second.
Discussion?
You want to talk about 533, Rule 3?
Oh.
Again.
This goes back to what you said earlier, Board Member Levy. We haven't finalized Rule 533 Rule 3 at this point. We're still waiting on feedback from legal, so we can't finish this policy merging, we can't finish this policy merging until we get that corrected. Or we can go ahead and do this later.
No, since it wasn't listed on the agenda, I had no idea that the administration was working on 533 Rule
Right.
3. So you would just need to vote down the motion.
The motion you just made?
Yeah, if we're still waiting on policy 533 Rule 3, then I would recommend that we vote down the motion, and then we could just resume this discussion at our August meeting, unless anyone objects.
I agree with Board Member Levy to vote this down.
Okay. Okay, so we had the first and second, and so all those in favor say aye. All those in favor say nay.
Opposed, nay.
Opposed, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Nay.
Nay. So we'll move this, postpone this till the following to August. So that is, we are to the next meeting date, which will be, daggone it. It's Wednesday, August the 7th at 5:30 p.m. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
So moved.
I second.
Motions, discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned at 7:01. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.